You were good. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever Team Braconi Live. That is correct. We're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, here to answer all of your questions. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, your hosts, Alfredo and Steve Braconi. How we doing, gentlemen?
Awesome. Doing great today. Doing great.
Nice. So we got a lot of fun tips and tricks and helping people today. I believe we're talking about home buying tips and tricks. So anything new, anything fun and exciting we want to tell everyone at home?
I think we got a bunch of great topics today. Alfredo came up with the list. I saw some of them. Some of them I don't know what we're going to speak about, but I'm excited and starting to get some very good feedback from the podcast and decided to go live so that we can be more interactive and answer some questions, stuff like that. So very excited to get it going.
Absolutely. So that reminds me to tell you guys we are live. So if you have a question, comment, or concern, please put it in the comment section and we will answer for you today live. What do we got today, Alfredo?
Do that. So we kind of want to gear today's conversations more towards the buyer side. We're going to kind of give out some tips and tricks like we mentioned. And if you do have a question, please feel free to chime in and we'll be happy to answer those. One thing I wanted to kind of start off with is something that I notice a lot happens with a buyer. They're indecisive on whether they want to buy a condo or a single family home. And there's a lot to know when you're trying to purchase a condo that is completely different from the single family purchase. And a lot of it has to do with lending. And I think a lot of people may not realize that when you go to purchase a home and you're getting financing, there's a condo questionnaire, and that actually keeps it getting added onto. And we've had a recent change with the condo collapse in Florida. So there's a lot to know. And I think we wanted to kind of delve into that a little bit today to kind of give our listeners some tricks or some inside knowledge that maybe help you prepare when you're talking to a lender for that purpose. And maybe Steve can go over a couple of the condo questionnaires that will kind of help a buyer, understand that particular market a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out also, there's a big difference between co-ops, cooperatives, and condominiums. So we're speaking today about condominiums because co-ops, there's a separate approval process within the community itself. So just because your buyer gets approved for the loan from the financing end doesn't mean they're going to get approved and actually purchase the home through the cooperative board. And there's a separate board set up to interview and go through their application separately again from the lender. So that's the cooperative or co-op. With the condominium, there is not that additional layer of approval through the board itself or the HOA, right, the association. However, lenders do have extra layers, if you will, of approval process. So the community itself, so the condo itself has to be approved through the lender. So oftentimes we get calls from buyers who, quite honestly, they're very qualified. They're overqualified. And ultimately, on several occasions, many occasions, too many occasions that are unfortunate, they get denied the ability to purchase that home based on the approval of the community. So they're very approved to buy the home based on all the numbers, the maintenance fee per month, the taxes, the mortgage with their down payment. But for whatever reason, and we'll go over some of those reasons today, the lender has not approved the association itself. So what Alfredo was referencing with regards to the Florida condo collapse, it was in Florida, structure collapsed. And so after that occurred, lenders all of a sudden changed certain guidelines. And I think the guidelines will continue to evolve and change as time goes forward because this is still relatively new. But they ultimately don't want to take that significant of a risk, right? So they have additional questions in which called the condo questionnaire. So it's just that it's a form that the management company typically fills out for the lender that answers a series of questions with regards to their qualifying questions. Would the lender ultimately want to lend money based on the answers to these questions? And one of those questions that has been added recently, and this is very important, would be the structural integrity. Are there any structural issues? They can word it different ways, but ultimately they're trying to get to, are there any known or possible structural issues? And so the possible part is what's throwing management companies off, in my experience. And so management companies, again, in my experience, have been hesitant to answer that question because they're not a structural engineer. They're not an engineer of any type typically. And they don't want to take the liability on. They don't want to take any additional liability on. So they're either leaving that question blank, which is insufficient, which is a reason to deny the loan, right? Or they're answering it either possible or yes, there has been or there will likely be structural issues, which is normal for most buildings. At some point, buildings either erode, there's structural right, exactly. And so you have to address those things. I own real estate, and one of the condos I own, there's a parking structure issue, and it's not totally out of the realm of normal. It kind of isn't the best news, and there's an assessment, which is a temporary payment period that you pay into this, right? But that those reasons now are now giving lenders the ability and really forcing them not to loan on those properties. So
become a non-conforming portfolio loan. Which is a higher interest rate. But we have partners, lending partners that we work with that can offer competitive rates.
It's just important to know that up front.
Exactly. And that's our job as an agent to say, hey, these are the potential roadblocks that you might run into. If you want to purchase in this particular building, it's going to happen regardless because that's just the way that it is. And we may not know that ahead of time because sometimes we run into issues as we go. I had an issue in one that for some reason the guidelines changed, and because the amenity space was not actually owned by the condo association, it was a lease space. There's a lease agreement that now fell out of the conforming guidelines. We ultimately ended up getting that done, but it presented another roadblock.
And let me just explain conforming, just so everyone kind of knows it. So when he's saying conforming, conventional financing is sellable or warrantable. So what happens is these lenders come in and they provide the financing to the buyer, and more times than not, nearly always, they will sell that loan off to investment groups or larger corporations. When it's non-warrantable or non-conforming, the original lender has to hold that note for that period of time, whether it's 30 years, 15 years, 10 years, whatever the agreement is, right? So those loans that they have to hold internally, they can't make quick money on. And so they oftentimes, nearly always, will charge a higher interest rate for that convenience because it's more difficult to provide financing to those communities. And to Alfredo's point, we do have multiple partners that we work with that would provide that financing, but it's very important that the consumer knows up front that they're going to be paying 3/4 of a point higher, depending on what they're doing, so they can work backwards and make sure that their offer is justly sound based on their holding costs per month, because it may have shifted from going to a larger bank that only deals with warrantable or sellable loans. Those loans are, generally speaking, a lower interest rate. So it's really important that they know that up front.
Exactly. And you mentioned the holding costs, or, what a consumer is comfortable spending. And I think that's another wrinkle with condos when you're talking about the homeowners association, is your lender is going to factor that in. So if you're looking at a single family home and you're looking at the tax and what your mortgage payment is going to be, I'll often get clients say, well, I don't want to pay that HOA. And I tell them, when you own a single family home, you're paying an HOA. It's just internal. You should set aside some funds, on a monthly basis, because your fence is going to fall down, your gutter is going to break. You got to do the lawn maintenance. All that's taken care of for you when you're buying into a condo. So there are benefits of that condo living, but now we're talking about both sides. We're saying, there's some roadblocks that on the lending side, because of the condo questionnaire, you have how many renters are the rent to ownership ratio in a condo community is going to factor whether the lender is going to be able to provide a warrantable loan. You have one individual may own more than 10% of the units in that building itself. That will also affect whether that's a warrantable loan. So there's many factors to consider. And we can, as realtors, we can hook you up with great lenders that can go over all of them with you. With our experience, we kind of have an understanding of most of
They could also vary per bank,
Yeah.
right? So that's the other thing is the condo questionnaires are slightly different depending on the bank. The last point I want to say on this one is a large number of, especially the bigger banks, will always say, in my experience over 2 decades of doing this, that they can do the loan, that they can provide the financing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually basing it on the client's ability to qualify. And they're not looking into the condo questionnaire yet. All that will cost money. Usually the buyer would pay for that to be ordered through the management company. Again, they'd fill it out. But they're almost making an assumption, they being the bigger banks, that they can do the financing provided that it can get the client approved. And again, most of the clients we deal with, they are very qualified, so it's not an issue. So now we've got their lender telling them, "Oh, no problem, no problem." And I've been down this road so many times, and it's like, yeah, it is a problem because I'm familiar with their products, and they don't have a portfolio or, again, a loan that they could hold for the course of the entire term. And so instead they have to sell this off, and no one's going to buy that because of these questions answered this way. And if that's not, it might not be a big deal, but if that's not explained properly to the buyer up front, oftentimes the buyer can get scared. This is a huge purchase. It's oftentimes an emotional roller coaster. And if all of a sudden their lender, who they trust, is saying, "Oh, we can't provide financing there. Don't buy that. Maybe buy something else." There may be condos that certainly buyers should stay away from, but there's other condos that are perfectly fine. They just don't fit in a perfect square box. And those condos you can often get a pretty good value on, and excellent living and luxury living with a lot of the properties we deal with that are right now not conventional, but they may be conventional again in the future because this is continuing to evolve. These parameters continue to change and shift.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. So quick question, maybe unpack this. I think you touched base on. So when you get a loan for your condo, those HOA fees are incorporated into that loan.
Yeah. Well, what I was saying was
They're not.
They're not.
No,
Okay.
What I was saying was that the lender is going to factor that in. They're gonna
Gotcha.
say,
The lender's going to factor it into the ratio
the
Gotcha.
ratio,
Because
Yes. to make sure they can afford it.
Because
But
part
it's
B
not
of that.
paid within the mortgage.
Gotcha.
It's paid separately.
Because part B would be of that question is because, like, I know our condo dues keep going up. So if you were to get a loan and these condo dues going up, like,
it would affect your
would
ratio or
affect your
ability
ratio.
to qualify. 100%.
there you go.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is they wouldn't say, "Well, you're buying a single family home. Let's throw in $500 a month extra cushion
No.
so that you can afford that." Right? You should be doing that yourself
Gotcha.
as a homeowner.
Yeah, because over time the roof goes, siding goes, mechanicals go,
Yep.
HVAC,
I think-
hot water heater.
Yeah, I think everyone should just have their own separate reserve. Call it an HOA on your own.
Yep.
You know.
Emergency
But
funds.
what Steve was saying was, I mean, the most important part is we often do get clients that have a great relationship with their larger banks, and they're not the best suited, especially for condos, to take care of those things. And they will tell you up and down because they know the client themselves is qualified. They got excellent assets, but they leave out the most important part is, can they actually lend in that building?
And it's with
itself?
good intentions,
Yeah.
because oftentimes they have an extremely competitive rate. But if you're getting a rate that doesn't qualify for that particular product,
Zero.
it's really, it could be zero. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
You can't close the loan. It doesn't really matter. So again, it's very important that our buyers get accurate information and, an accurate depiction of the entire process of purchasing that particular home so they can make the best offer up front and they know what they're getting into.
And it's just another reason why we partner with the lenders that we do, because we've seen them work on different types of buildings, or whether it's a single family home that has a challenging situation. They are the best suited that we've had in our experience to get it done. So that's why we recommend them. It's not for any other reason than we know what their customer service is excellent, and we know that they are capable, whether they have multiple products available to fit into different scenarios. They have the ability to do it, and that's why we recommend them.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, they can contact us directly on
Right now. Good. Thanks for reminding me. We are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please put them in the comments section and we will answer them live with you guys today. And of course, you can always email Team Braconi or give them a call. But we would love to chat with you today live for our first ever live podcast. So if you have a question, comment, or concern, put in the comments.
a lot more in the condos, but we'll move to the next topic.
All
But
right.
you get down this rabbit hole of it's very complex and complicated. But if you start breaking it down, each piece, it becomes more simple and easier to understand.
Awesome. Awesome.
So
Good stuff.
we also, continuing on the path of providing some tips and tricks for potential buyers is, and I'm sure some people do this with all the technology that we have now. We still do end up, unfortunately, getting some clients. We'll meet them at the property, and they don't like the street, or they don't like it's too close to a railroad. All this stuff is easily just go on Google Street View or Google Earth, and you can save yourself a lot of time just by checking that out ahead of time. Because it does you no good to and some of our clients are coming from New York and they're traveling so far only to realize that, oh, that house is next to a railroad. I'm never going to buy it. It's just out of my my checklist. It doesn't fit in there. So that's one piece of advice that I would strongly suggest. Is just, it's an easy thing you could do they'll save you a lot of time.
Awesome. Good stuff. So that's our condo segment. What else we got today, boys?
Well, I wanted to. My point was just to provide some more tips. That was one for a home buyer. Hooking up with the right agent. I think it's important before you just go out, and whether it's Zillow or Realtor.com and you're being hooked up with an agent, do your research, talk to a couple, figure out who's going to be best suited to work with you. Have a good connection, a good relationship, because you're going to be wanting to rely on that one person going forward, and you can have that relationship for a year. I mean, some people take a really long time to purchase a home, so that's going to be a significant relationship in your decision to purchase, or your biggest decision, one of your biggest decisions is purchasing a home. So do your research ahead of time, and obviously you're going to want to meet them. And if you have that good connection, then keep that relationship going forward. It's going to be a very important relationship for you.
Yeah, I think as buyers figure out that they're looking to buy, to Alfredo's point, first thing I always recommend is contact a lender. And we can recommend one if you don't have a friend or a family member or someone you trust in the business, because it should be certainly someone that's highly recommended and excellent in their field, right? But then you work backwards and you can figure out not only what you can afford, but what you're comfortable affording. There's a big difference sometimes between what someone could qualify for and what they're actually comfortable doing. They may want to go on vacations and they're saving for college educations and other things that they want to put their money in besides a home. So where are you comfortable? Once they've figured that out, I try to narrow down geographically where they're comfortable. Because if someone gives me a list of 7 or 8 towns, and there's 5 to 6 pockets of each town, that's a lot of area to cover, and it becomes frustrating oftentimes for buyers. So what I recommend is, okay, let's start with your either favorite 2 or maximum 3 towns. And within those towns, are there pockets of that particular town that is favorable to you? Maybe families close to those towns. Like, why are you choosing those towns? There might be multiple school systems within a town. You would want to be on that side of town. So I think it's very important to pick a specific area once you have the financing in order. And then when you have the financing order and geographic location that's targeted, you really focus on those things. And by doing that also, there might be towns next to each other and the tax rate might be double in the town over. It might be 2.2% versus more closer to 1%. That's going to make a significant difference in the lending and the holding costs. So as the lender contacts us and says, where are they looking? It's nice to try to target an area, because the price point in town A with a tax rate of half of town B is going to be significantly different. They're going to be able to afford a different home in that town A than town B. So I think it's very important to line up the lending, then really target in your geographical area that you prefer, and work backwards. If they can't find exactly what they're looking for or close enough to what they're looking for that they're going to be happy, then you can always expand out. You've kind of exhausted that zone, but start where it's preferable. And then again, it doesn't become so frustrating, because they're going to be looking at so many different areas. It's going to take so much time. It's going to get diluted. And also, you might not be able to compare town A with town B. It might just be totally different price points, different lot sizes, different taxes. And it's difficult to compare apples to oranges. You might prefer one or the other. Let's go after that. That doesn't work. We could always venture out.
Great stuff. Great stuff. We have our first live question here today. So Pasquale asks, how could someone choose the right agent for them? What are some steps to picking out the right agent?
I mean, referrals are our number one source of business. So that's a start. Talk to friends, family, and see, or neighborhood groups who are the most active realtors, and then do your research online. The ones that are the most active are going to have a lot of activity online. You're going to see them on certain review profiles, and they're going to have some social media activity. Then meet them. Say, hey, I'm looking to buy a home. You want to grab a coffee? You don't understand how uh, attentive a realtor would be to that kind of question. Is we want that. We want to talk to you, sit down to you, figure out what your goals are. And like Steve said, I almost never ask what is your purchase price. That doesn't mean anything. It's what can you comfortably afford to moving forward as whether you're a single person or a family, whatever your goals are. But definitely, there's resources online to kind of do your due diligence. Then once you narrow it down, chat with them.
I
Grab
think
coffee.
referral is very important. I get the vast majority of our business, like Alfredo said, from referral. We've done it a long time. We've sold a few thousand homes. So that certainly helps. However, certain agents might work better with other clients. And it doesn't mean it's a good agent or a bad agent, but you have to feel that connection. It's a very important relationship where you're talking about someone's arguably biggest asset. So it's very important you have a personal connection that you feel not only you can trust them, but they're going to be the best fit to represent you. And again, one of your biggest assets, if not your biggest asset. They have to be local, in my opinion. They can't be driving 2 hours and properly represent you. There's certain communities that, again, I've said it before, but are either cliquey or nichey. But you have to be within that network for multiple reasons to really have a good pulse in the market. I think that's very important. I also agree with Alfredo said with the online presence. I think we have almost 800 reviews on some of our sites. If you see that type of volume, and you don't need 800, but at least 100, 200, you know that the person's done enough right that people took the time to write reviews. And then you look at the grading. We're 5-star, we're best as Zillow. We've gotten a number of awards based on customer service. But that's very important because people, generally speaking, that aren't happy with service, they do
the negative. Yeah.
They're very vocal, right? So if you have someone like our team who has nearly 800 reviews and almost all are 5-star, we have a 5-star rating. That speaks volumes beyond the personal connection and the personal referral. You can go online and you can get a lot of that data. When I first started the business, that wasn't available, but that's a really nice resource.
Yeah, I mean, you may get a referral when you talk to friends and family. My cousin just started. That's fine. I mean, but are they the one at the right time? At that time, are they the right one to help you with that big decision?
I can't tell you how many times I get a call from someone that said, I feel horrible doing this, but I know that you've, sold X amount of homes and you're ranked top 0.1% in the country. And I really want you to represent me. And I feel bad because my sister just got her license, right? That's something we deal with all the time. But I tell them this is, even though it's a residential home, oftentimes it's still a business decision. If you're putting most of your money in this particular asset, it's very important you get the right person to represent you. And it also goes beyond the client. If you have the right agent, they typically have good relationships and get the respect of their peers, the other agents, which oftentimes, I don't know what it would be, maybe 95% of the time, I'm guessing, you deal with another agent on the other side. It's become more and more rare that the agent represents both sides because with all the lead generation and these companies buying these leads and selling them to other agents, it's not as common. When I first was in the business and I'd list a home, we would get nearly all of our own leads. So the buyers would contact the listing agent directly. It still happens, but not, like I said, maybe 1 out of 20. So 19 of those leads get bought by third-party companies and sold out to other agencies, and then they give them to their agents, which is fine. So then you have a buyer's representative and a seller's representative, which is fair. But it's important that the seller's agent has the respect of the buyer's agent and together. If you get someone that comes in, for example, that is a friend that's part-time and hasn't done this before or done it so minimal that they approach the transaction in a very inexperienced way, it can definitely affect the
100%
the way that the transaction goes and how smooth it goes. And and the attitude of the other agent, right? Because now you're having to do two people's jobs, and we have in our team, we have the structure, and I just want to be clear on that. We're okay with that. But when you're an individual agent, which I've been, it's very difficult to do someone else's job, especially when they're getting paid for it, right? So if you're dealing with a larger team like us, we can kind of take that on, even though it's really not the right thing to do. We'll do it for our client's best interest, but it's really beneficial to get the right agents on both sides.
Absolutely. When those, let's say, two offers come in, and one of them comes from a more experienced agent that the listing agent has a relationship with, not in a way that it's any collusion. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying they know how they operate. They know that they're smooth. They get the deal done. They typically have discussed the process with their client. They're just comfortable. And then the other offer comes in from an agent that is a little less experienced. The offer is not put very well together. There's no relationship. I mean, who's going to get that deal done, right? So who you work with is important, because it also helps when the offer is being presented to the other side. That agent's going to tell the seller, these are two very close offers. They're pretty much the same. I have a good relationship with this one, so I know that the risk level is a lot less, and that's usually who's going to win out. So definitely, check out the background of whoever you're going to decide to work with, because it's important as well.
Great stuff. We have another question from Brandon. What are common mistakes first home buyers make, and how can they be avoided?
I think that's kind of what we talked about before a little bit. So again, they make the mistake of not knowing where they're going to be comfortable financially, first and foremost. I also think there's so much on TV now that portrays this picture of you go and see one home, or two or three homes, and you found the perfect home. There's no perfect home, right? Virtually no perfect home for anyone. And even if, like, I've built a home that I thought was pretty perfect for what we were looking for, and by the time I was done with that build, which was maybe 12 to 18 months from breaking ground to being complete, I wish I had done things differently and planned it a little bit differently than I did. And it was perfect at the time, but then our family changed and things happen, and you're like, I kind of wish I did this or that. So I think the mistake is not checking. If it checks enough boxes, accepting the fact that home is a good investment, getting in the game, building equity, and going from there. Oftentimes what I see buyers do, and we let them do this because we don't want to pressure them in a situation or make them uncomfortable, but they'll usually I shouldn't say usually, but I would say 50% of the time, in my experience, they'll find the right property within the first week or two, because we're actively looking. And they're not ready, which is completely fine. They're not comfortable based on seeing a lack of properties. They want to see more homes before they make a decision. And I tell them at that point, then get this one out of your mind, because I know it's going to sell quick, and they do right now. So once that's gone, they'll always compare it to that particular home, right? And it's like, we kind of knew this. We knew it was a great home, but you weren't ready. We can't Monday morning quarterback. That's done, right? That home's gone. It's off the market. And that ultimately didn't work out for you, but we're going to find the right house for you. So we kind of try to get them to move on. But I would say that's a mistake, is if it's a savvy buyer or an investor or someone like myself who's bought a lot of real estate, I kind of know what I'm looking for. So I'm ready to go, right? I'm comfortable with the financing. I know that that's a good home, and I'm really ready to pull the trigger. When someone's not comfortable and hasn't done this a multitude of times, it's rightfully so, they're hesitant. But that hesitation sometimes can be a mental drain on them, because they're always comparing everything to that first or second or third home that they saw. And oftentimes it wasn't even as great as they remember it being, right? They're thinking back to thinking, and it's like, no, remember these two things you were saying, oh yeah, but now I can get over that. But it's timing, right? Everything comes down to the timing.
Yeah,
great stuff.
I mean, so many gems in that right there. I mean, it's maybe not being prepared on the lending side either. If you do end up falling in love with that first house you see, which is rare, but not being qualified to present that offer, especially in the last 2 years. I mean, it's changing now, but when offers were just coming left and right, you're going in as fresh on a property that may get 30 offers. It's one thing if you're just doing your due diligence and you're you want to do some research on that community and what kind of house fits your family in person rather than online. But it's another thing when you are ready to buy, but you actually haven't prepared yourself to buy because you didn't even, you didn't speak to a lender. So that's huge, and you can do soft pulls on your credit. I know people are hesitant to get a pre-approval, but you can do soft pulls that are not going to affect your credit. So it behooves you to be ready to write that offer.
And the other thing is pricing, right? So you have clients that have made a number of offers and failed to get a home because their price wasn't advantageous enough typically to get the home. They were outbid, in short. So now they're more ready. They realize, okay, the $600,000 house might go for $620 or $630, and they're starting to focus more on what does the home offer, because the price point as far as listing goes, what you list a property at, it only has to be agreed on by the listing agent and the owner. It could be anything, right? But if a home is worth $700,000, for argument's sake, and you list it at $500,000, the theory, which I see happen nearly every time, is it will bid up to $700,000 and sometimes more because you get so much attention on that property. But the same home that's worth $700,000, if you list it at $900,000, it's not going to go for that. It's going to end up sitting there and becoming stale and reduce. And actually, by the time you get to 700, a lot of the buyers that we interact with, they don't even want to see it. They think something's wrong with it, and even though it's only the price point. So you're either going to get 700, which it was worth, or you could argue that you may get less than that, because now, even though there's nothing wrong with the home in this particular scenario that I'm painting, it is in the buyer's mind because it took too long to sell, and otherwise it would have sold. They don't want to hear that it was just priced wrong, right? So point being, the buyers that are just starting out, they may make the mistake of not seeing the value and paying a little bit too much attention to the asking price, because the asking price may be way too high or way too low. And the realtor's job is to send them comparable sales based on mathematical evaluations, typically in the last 180 days, in the same area, with the same parameters, bedrooms, bathrooms, lot size, square footage, that show the value. And if the buyer is willing to listen to that type of data and information and digest it and understand it, they're going to get a home for a fair price. And if they're not, then it may take some time to go through it before they realize, okay, buyers are paying that. The agent was pretty spot on with his numbers because that's what it ended up selling for.
Yeah, it kind of encompasses everything you're talking about. If your agent is able, in their experience, as I mentioned earlier, do your research and hook up with someone that has that experience. If they're providing you comps that are over the price of whatever the asking price was, because it's arbitrary number, the asking price, you should, as to that question, what's some mistakes that they may make, listen to the guidance of your experienced agent. They're giving you comps that match almost exactly that home. I mean, single family homes is a little more challenging because they're not all, not one single family home same. Condos are a lot easier because although you can do some renovations and change things, for the most part, the square footage lines, like, the line, like 08 line, for example, of a condo building is all going to be the same. Just depends on what floor you left, so comps for that are easy. So if your agent is saying, hey, here's the numbers, I'm not even, I have no emotion in this, here's the numbers, and you come in and understanding the market, the current market condition, right? If those two things are understood and you're coming in, $75,000 under asking price, but the asking price was extremely fair, and in fact they're going to get multiple interest, then you're doing a disservice to yourself because you have no shot. You have no shot at that property. So, just because you feel like the asking price is something we can negotiate on, yes, in some markets it will be, but understand the current market conditions. So take your
and it's fun. And I want to be clear, we'll present any offer. Yeah. And we have to, we're obligated to, and we tell them we're fine going through that exercise, and we understand that's what you feel it's worth, but what you feel it's worth isn't lining up with the math, right? So if you want to get the home, or at least a shot at getting the home, here's the math. You might want to review it and consider it. And if not, we'll go through the exercise. Right, and miracles occasionally happen.
Miracles do happen,
but it's far and few between, especially in this market. But as things shift, I think that there'll be buyers that are more patient, right? Will have a chance, which we just talked about recently. I think that's last to that point is, as a first-time home buyer, typically they're a first-time home buyer. They're not an investor. So even if you can save $10,000, or you want to take a chance of maybe shaving $10,000 off, and as you said, miracles could happen. You're there for the long haul as a first-time home buyer. Most likely, you're going to be there with your family
most likely. So that is it more worthwhile the opportunity to get that property and listen to the guidance and the numbers that are actually there, or try to save $10,000 because that's going to delay your goal of getting the type of home that you want.
Great stuff, guys. Want to remind you guys, we are live. So if you put a question, comment, or concern in the comment section, we can answer it for you today, live.
So let's delve into the next topic, which is what kind of separates and this could segue into what we were talking about, is how to pick your right agent. What separates a good agent from a great agent? Like, for example, what got you to top 0.1% in the U.S.?
Yeah. And I'll touch on this today, but this is probably something that we could talk a lot about. I think much of the success in any business is mental, right? And so then you ask what someone has gone through life to become mentally strong and have fortitude, and you push through. And we have different markets in real estate. But to answer your question, I think a lot of it is the mental ability to push through and really continuously work in the best interest for your clients, even though sometimes that might not be the easiest thing. You have other things pulling you other directions throughout life, but really staying focused at the task at hand and growing your business the right way, with honesty and integrity and ethics. It's easy to say that. And in the beginning of the business, I got so frustrated, I almost went back to venture capital, to be perfectly frank, because I was telling clients at the time, that I didn't think certain properties were the right situation for them. And all the other agents were kind of pushing their clients into these transactions. But there was a number of reasons, and it was a bit coincidental that I felt it wasn't the right thing. But what ended up happening over the course of time is this huge wave came back to me with friends and family of those particular clients. And a lot of those clients ended up buying something else anyway, because they trusted me.
Exactly.
So I think if I had to say it in I guess, two-prong, one would be mental fortitude and ability to push through situations, both throughout life and in real estate. And for me, when I was younger, I was a wrestler, and wrestling was a very hard physical sport, basically fighting someone on the mats. But it was much more difficult mentally than I ever imagined. So mentally, it was much more challenging than it was physically. Physically, you can kind of push through, but mentally, you don't want to break, right? You want to try to break the person in the sense that they give up, and then you win the match. So when I actually wrestled 4 years of varsity in high school, and when I made the varsity team in freshman year, I was very excited. I didn't realize how challenging that would be at the time, pushing through and wrestling upperclassmen who are much stronger and more mentally strong than me. But it pushed me to the next level. And then since then, that I trained jiu-jitsu. So for me, those different arts with the grappling and physically being exhausted and beat up, but allowing myself to mentally push through barriers. And my barrier might be different than a pro, right? But I'm trying to raise my tolerance mentally, and then physical will follow. I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger who said something like, when you're lifting weights, you'll mentally fail way before you physically fail.
Right.
And I work out in the gym as well. And I find that completely true. Even when I stop, it's usually mentally, like I'm either just my body is burning and exhausted and fatigued, or I'm thinking this is getting too heavy. I can't do it anymore. And I can always push myself way beyond where I thought, but I could probably push myself further. You could argue that. Anyway, going back to real estate, that happened through real estate for me, because I was going through a cycle where I didn't have the right contacts, with the team we were just speaking about, having the right lender, having the attorneys, having the home inspectors. And so I was losing deals, no fault of my own. I was being overly honest, if you even want to use that. I was being honest, right? So those people were going in different directions as far as holding off. But again, it all came back to me. So I'd say the mental fortitude is extremely important. And then being honest with people. If you have those things aligned, and those are two things that are very hard to learn, either you're honest or you're not. That's just my opinion. Mental, you're either mentally pretty sound and tough, or you need to really work on that. And even if I felt like I was always pretty mentally tough, but I wasn't near as tough as I thought I was when I was put in situations, and I was able to grow from that. So when things got tough with real estate, I had the ability to think back to some really tough things I pushed myself through, and I was able to do that during those cases, and it's really helped me.
This is perfect timing because it's kind of going on what you're talking about right now. So, that mental toughness. Why don't you describe or tell us, was it tough to this is a question just came in. Was it tough selling your first home? Was that difficult?
That actually came pretty naturally. The first 7 deals I ever had fell apart, believe it or not. And so it was a cascading event. And I went from making very good money. I think I was making double what my friends were making because I'd worked very hard and I got a job with a venture capital firm to making zero. I didn't have benefits anymore. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have a salary and bonus and these stock options. I had nothing. So I really wanted to get into real estate. And I say this a lot, but what drove me was the fear of failing. I was so scared that I was going to fail, and I didn't have a safety net. I didn't. It was either going to make it or break it, So I pushed through, and I felt like that really helped me a lot.
Nice, great stuff. We got one more question just came in. What is your advice for a first-time home buyer with credit that's not so great?
There's repairs. So 2 of our lenders that we work with, our preferred lenders, they have in-house, I think one outsources, but in-house repair companies.
Yeah.
So they'll take your credit and they'll tell you exactly what to do. So depending on your particular situation, for example, they might say you need to pay this credit card off completely or not. You need to I've heard don't pay this particular payment because then you're admitting guilt. Send this letter instead. I'm no expert on credit, but there's definitely ways that you can rebuild it. It does take time. It doesn't happen in a week or 2. It does take a few months. But oftentimes, again, if someone's just starting to look and they just found out their credit isn't acceptable to a lender, they may not be ready to pull the trigger on a home yet anyway. So get that process going right away, rebuild the credit, work backwards. And then there's certain tiers. And this would be more of a question for a lender, but there's tiers that allow the interest rate to either go up or down. You don't need a perfect credit score, 800, to be in the top tier. Meaning, I remember my credit score was over 800, and they're like, you could have had whatever it might have been. I think it was 740, something on that, and you would have got the same rate because I thought the rate was high at the time. This was years ago when I had mortgages, but you could get it to a 740. So even if you're at a 600, if you go up 140 points, you could be in the best tier. Whereas before you might have been in the 3rd tier. So it's not a huge difference in tiers.
Interesting.
It's also good timing because if you eventually build your credit and you can get up to an FHA, which is, when we were dealing with multiple offers, it was a lot more challenging for FHA, but we're moving more towards buyers having more options. And if you can get yourself built and you qualify for FHA loan because they're more favorable for lower credit terms. Now you have some options because the market has changed where you don't have to deal with 30 buyers in some cases, but we still see it here and there. But it is definitely changing. And as a buyer in your position, who the gentleman asked the question, or whoever,
the person
that asked the question, you are getting into a market now that might favor you a little bit better now.
Awesome. Great stuff. We love the questions that are coming in. So last chance, if you have a question, put in the comment section. We'll answer it live. Anything else, fellas?
So to that topic of like credit and rates, a lot of people often there's this negative connotation of this phrase that I hear all the time, which I don't actually like. I hate the phrase, but the idea behind it has some merit. I never say date the rate, marry the home, because people are saying that that the rate will change eventually. Don't worry about the rate. That is true. Rates always fluctuate. If you look historically, rates fluctuate up and down. Home values, although they might seem to fluctuate, they actually historically only go up. So when I talk to a client, I don't ever say that specific phrase, but it's really, are you comfortable? The rate is what it is now. Are you comfortable in the price range that you are looking? Are you comfortable to buy financially? It goes back to what's your monthly payment going to be? If that's the case, if that answer is yes, then it is still a good time to buy, because you're doing it for whatever your goal is. You're doing it for that purpose. It could be long-term investment. It could be because your family wants to be in that community.
Well, especially if they're living there.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're living there, what's the cost of living? Like, you only have that. I tell people that's the most precious commodity, right? Life,
Mhm.
because you don't know how much you have. Number one, right? And number two, you can't get more of it no matter what you do.
Mhm.
So I do think that the rates will continue to climb. That's my opinion based on my experience, the charts I've looked at, and the people I've spoke to. It doesn't mean it won't come down and then go up, but I think the trend will be upward. But it's still, this was Alfredo's point, I believe, but it's still a sweet spot for a lot of people right now, because even though home prices, I do believe, will come down in different parts. I don't pretend to be an expert throughout the world, never, the United States.
Mhm.
Even New Jersey has very different pockets.
Mhm.
And even within our area of New Jersey that we really specialize in, there's certain towns that we know are going to be much more affected with probability than the other towns.
Mhm.
And there's various reasons for that. Regardless, I think that home prices throughout the United States will certainly come down. And for cash buyers or someone that's not using leverage or financing, that's going to be a great opportunity. However, if you're financing a portion, even if you're putting 20% down, 80% is still being financed, right? So you have to factor that in. So even though the home prices come down, if the interest rates come up, which we strongly believe that they will, and all indications show that they will, your holding costs per month could likely be higher, and perhaps significantly higher, depending on how much you're leveraging, how much you're financing. And over the course of time, that home might cost you more than paying something more for it today than you would 2 years from now, based on the interest rates. So it's a bit of a gamble. But again, I go back to it's the cost of enjoying your life, right? When I bought my single family home that I live in with my family, we made an offer. I made one offer. That's how I did it. It was just one offer, take it or leave it. Ironically, the seller was also a real estate agent, and she took the offer. And I made it higher than what I would have bought that home for if it was strictly investment. In hindsight, it was a great deal, and I did very well in that home. We still live there. But my wife really wanted the home, and we came up with a number that this is what it's worth to us. And mathematically, it was right in that ballpark that we spoke of, maybe towards the lower end, but it was also heavy cash, and I waived a number of the contingencies to make it more advantageous, and they took the offer. But I feel as though that ability to be decisive is extremely important.
Great stuff, boys. Great stuff, guys. I think that's a nice, fun-filled episode right there. The first ever live Team Braconi podcast.
Not too bad.
Yeah. Anything else that we want to leave the people at home?
I just want to thank everyone.
Yeah.
So many people have reached out to me,
Mhm.
text messages and phone calls, funny screenshots of me saying things, but I really appreciate the support. And as we continue to do this, we'll become, I think, more polished and better at this, like anything else.
Absolutely.
But I do feel as though we're going to add value and transparency with honesty, and I think that the market is set up for a significant shift. That's my opinion. I've been saying it. We're starting to see it a little bit now. And as that occurs, I think we're going to be a nice tool providing guidance to our audience.
Awesome.
Maybe we can vlog your home purchase experience.
Absolutely. We will. It's starting today, right? It's starting now. So I got an idea. Why don't we do a little contest? I'm going to snip that little clip right there. We do appreciate you guys screenshotting us, telling you love the podcast. And this is the first live stream. So if you, on this clip right here, you're going to put a question in the comments, not the comments of this video, the comments of the post we're putting in right now. You can put in your question, and we'll raffle off a $25 Starbucks gift card to a lucky winner who's put a question in the comment section and likes this post right here. So there you go for Team Braconi, the coffee contest. Anything else, boys?
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap for today.
I would want to say one more thing. If people want to suggest certain topics,
that's true. Yeah,
I think we're more than open to that. There's a number of guests that have contacted me that would like to be guests rather on the podcast, so they'll be coming. But if anyone has specific topics that they would see benefit in us discussing, we would be happy to take a look at those and try to prepare.
Yeah,
to discuss.
We can build some talking points off of your suggestions.
Awesome, great stuff, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in for the first ever Team Braconi live podcast, and we will see you next time. Have a good day.